Hi, everybody. So I've noticed when I was looking at your class kicks of lesson 8.3 that we're really struggling with writing our number lines. So we're going to break this up into 3 separate videos talking about each example from lesson 8.3. We're going to do examples 1, 2, and 3. All right, so we're going to just do example 1 right now, where it just talks about graphing the number and its opposite. So even though they're giving you just one rational number, they're actually asking for 2 parts because they're asking for the opposite. Let's recap on what an interval and an integer and a rational number are. An integer is when it is only, I'll write it down. If you want to write the notes down again, if you don't have it, if you didn't write it last time. Integer is a positive whole number. Its opposite, so I'll do like a little arrow. Its opposite, which really is a negative whole number. And then it's also 0. You can't forget the number 0. A rational number is an integer, so it could be anything of the above. It could be a positive or a negative fraction. It could be a positive or a negative mixed number. And it can also be a positive or negative decimal. All right, so I keep on saying rational number for these because 2.5 is a positive mixed number. Negative 4/5 is a negative fraction. Negative 3 5/10 is a negative decimal, and positive 5 25/100 is a positive decimal. There is no integers here, but if I said -5, that could be either considered a rational number or an integer. Okay. All right, so let's go back and we're going to plot these. So one of the number one things that I saw was that when you're doing your intervals and making your number lines, a lot of you are changing it, and you're doing possibly fifths here, and then you're doing halves here. Whatever you do here as your intervals, you need to do the same on the left. Okay. So for number 1, it is 2.5. So you need to look in your mind and say, well, do I need to go by halves, fourths, wholes? So I'm going to go by wholes, but I'm going to skip so that I actually do go by halves, kind of. So that's a half. So that means that this is 1, and it's positive 1. And if you notice, I am doing a dash in between each one to say the marking of what it is. Now, it is 2.5, so I do need to go past the 2 and go to the 3, even though I don't have 3, because I need to know where my 2.5 is, right? And I do need to know its opposite, so that means I do have to do the same on the other side. So it's going to be space, -1, space, -2, space, -3. I have to do the same on both sides. All right, so it's 2.5. A lot of you were not showing where they were. You would just show your number line. So you want to make sure you know where 2.5 is, and you do that by putting the dot on exactly on the number line. A lot of you are putting it above, so you want to put it exactly on. And you can either say 2.5 down here, or you could say 2.5 up here. You can do your marking either way, all right? But you should label what your dot is. If it's directly on a number already, on a rational number or an integer, that means that then you can just put the dot there. You don't have to label it because it already is labeled. So when you're doing the opposite, if it's positive 2.5, then it needs to be also -2.5. So you have to be careful, because a lot of you are going to think it's here because you're thinking going to the right, but we're going opposite. So it has to be between -2 and -3. So it's going to be here. And I'm going to label it -2.5. And that's how we find our rational numbers and its opposite. So let's do number 2. Number 2 is -4/5. So for this one, I do need to go to +1 and -1, but I actually have to break it up even more. And because I have a nice long number line, I'm going to go by fifths. So here's 0. This is going to be 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5. So this is going to be 1. All right. So I'm going to label a few of them just so that 2/5, and I'm going to say 4/5. All right. If you want to, you can label all of them. That's fine. All right. Just make sure that it's all nice and neat. And then you have to go to the other side. So this is -1/5, -2/5, -3/5, -4/5. Here is -1 because that is -5/5. And then it's going to be -1/5, -2/5, -3/5, -4/5. All right, and we're looking for -4/5. So I'm going to put it right directly on the number line. I don't have to label it because it's already there. But I also have to find the opposite, and the opposite is +4/5. And please make sure that we can read it. Make sure when you're taking your picture, I'm able to see those dots on there. So if it's really tiny dot, I'm not going to be able to read it. All right. So now we're going to go to number 3, and it's -3/5. So again, it looks like I'm going to go by halves because it's -3. I'm sorry, not -3/5, -3 5/10. So I'm going to go by halves, and it looks like I'm going to have to go to the number 4 and -4. So this is going to be +1. I'm skipping +2, +3, and then +4. And then I have to do the same thing on the other side. So make sure you're skipping and make sure you're writing everything, but don't forget to write your negative sign. A lot of people forget to write the negative sign. Okay, so here is 1. So now you're going to have -3 5/10, and then you're going to have +3 5/10. All right. And now here's number 4. For number 4, you actually have so much information here that you would have to go by quarters. And because it's such a short number line, you probably won't be able to, but there's a way around that. Because if you go by halves, so here is 1, and we are going to have to go to 6 and -6. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then if you do that on the opposite side, go by halves. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. If you notice, if this is a half, then that means if you go directly in between the 0 and the half, that's your quarter. That's your 25/100ths. This is your 75/100ths. So you're able to still go in between it. All right. So here we have 5 and 25/100ths. So if this is 5.5, then this is 5 and 25/100ths. And then if I go to the opposite side, here's -5.5. Be careful because -5 and 25/100ths is closer to -5. So it's halfway here. All right. And then there's your number line. All right. And I hope I was able to help you with graphing a number and its opposite.